It is Saturday, June 14th, 2025. This is a show in which I advocate Ayn Rand's philosophy of life and happiness. And I invite you to join the show. You can participate in a couple of ways other than just by watching. You can participate in the live chat on YouTube. There's a text chat there, and I encourage people to make any comments, questions, or just say hi. That's what I use to generate a lot of material for my show, is the kind of the comments that my viewers put in the chat. I also have a phone line open for anyone who wants to call in and have a live discussion. The info on how to call in is pinned in the chat on YouTube. Well, it's been a pretty eventful last few days in the world. There was an attack by Israel on Iran, its nuclear facilities, and then there was a counterattack by Iran against Israel. I haven't spent a lot of time keeping up with it, but I did follow it a little bit. I listened to the Yaron Brook show coverage of it for at least part of the time it was going on. I guess it was a couple days ago. And when it started, I think it the was it Thursday that Israel attacked Iran. So Iran did a live coverage of that for I think like 3.5 hours. So I tuned in for part of that and thought that was good. I submitted a super chat to him, just thanking him for the commentary, and I said bravo Israel, because I'm glad that they did this attack on Iran, because Iran is the I think the source, the spiritual source of a lot of the terrorism in the world since their Islamic revolution several decades ago in 1979. They when they overthrew the Shah, and then they installed this Islamic theocratic regime. They took hostages of Americans in the embassy and held them for, was it over a year? I don't remember exactly how many days it was. But then they've been, in the decades since, they've, um, I think, been an inspiration to uh, other people, Islamists, Islamic terrorists around the world. I think they've funded Hezbollah and Hamas. So a very bad regime in my view, and I think it's long overdue that that regime is overthrown. So I'm hopeful that will happen. I guess we're in the very early phases of this war, but I hope it becomes a lasting, fundamental kind of change, not just a um, temporary setback for them. But I hope this actually leads to regime change, which can lead to more freedom in that region in the Middle East, and it'll eliminate a threat to other countries around the world, and eliminate I think, a major funder of the proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas that engage in terrorism. So I watched a little of the coverage on Iran show, I guess the day Thursday, and then also some yesterday after Iran was covering the counterattack. And I guess he's going to be doing more shows on this as it unfolds. So I encourage everyone to check his channel out, and because I think he's maybe the best commentator out there doing live coverage of this. So I definitely recommend that. I see we got someone already calling in the waiting room. I think that might be Darwin. Looks like Darwin. Um, so I'm actually not going to take this call, and the reason is I saw Darwin in Yaron's chat. I guess it was a couple days ago when Yaron was doing the coverage of the Israel attack on Iran, and I thought Darwin was being uncivil and disrespectful towards Iran. Um, and for that reason, I actually blocked him, and I'm not going to take his call. So it's unfortunate. I mean, I think it's been good to have Darwin participate on my show and call in a few times, but if you're going to be uncivil and disrespectful, either to me or to someone else like Iran, especially someone who I value, um, then that makes me not want to engage with you. So it is unfortunate. I don't know if Darwin, if you're hearing this, if you want to, I guess you could email me privately if you want. There's an email on my YouTube channel, and if you want to discuss it privately, you can. Maybe we can do that. We'll see if you want to, but right now I don't think I want to publicly engage, given what I saw from you in that chat. Um, so uh, that's that's my thought on that. So I'm not going to take the call right now, but maybe in the future. I don't know if there's something you can do to show me you've changed and or what, but I think I would want to handle that privately. Uh, okay, so what else is going on? I guess that's the major events going on in the world right now that I'm aware of. So there's that. And again, I encourage people to check out Yaron's show for coverage of that. I might have a little bit to say on it, but a lot of what I have to say, I don't follow it too closely. I spend most of my time focused on other things. Like I've been reading about the Bible recently, the book of Genesis, and I've studied a lot of cultural history, things like that. But if you want to hear commentary about the news, I think Yaron is a great source. He's definitely got his finger on the pulse, and he's actually watching live news coverage of things as they are going on, and he reports on them during his stream as well as giving his commentary on it and taking super chats. So I definitely recommend that. And I guess some of what I might have to say is based on what I hear from his show, since I don't always follow the news directly myself. Sometimes I get it through other sources. I think that's one of the benefits of your own show. You don't have to follow all the news yourself all the time. He does a lot of that, and then he says this on his show. Like, if you don't want to be like put in a bad mood following all the problems in the world, you can outsource the dirty work to him. Um, and I guess I do that a bit myself. I outsource some of my dirty work, um, but I do like to keep somewhat in touch with the news. But there's a division of labor here. Some people they specialize more in commenting on current news events, and other people they focus more on historical or cultural sorts of events. And I guess right now I have more of my emphasis on the latter. Um, and but there's a mix, all right? It's like I do sometimes follow the news a bit, but I guess my channel is more weighted right now, at least in a more historical, cultural, philosophical. sort of direction. All right, I see we got our first chat of the day from CPG 1859. I recognize that from a while ago. I think I saw you many weeks ago here, but he's back. Um, this is he says Israel has without doubt been a larger state sponsor of terrorism than Iran in terms of death, destruction, etc. Okay, looks like you are an anti-Israel person, um, and likely you're smearing Israel, I would say. If you say it's a state sponsor of terrorism, um, I think Israel is engaged in a war of self-defense. You say the non-aggression principle doesn't apply to Israel for a preemptive attack in libertarian terms, a war of aggression. No, there is such a thing as a preemptive attack. If you're threatened with force, if you know someone is coming after you, like with nuclear, if they have a plan, if they explicitly say, we're going to develop, our goal is the destruction of Israel, and they're taking actions towards that, then you can preemptively attack them. That's not out of the blue, just attacking them for no reason. It's because they're a threat to you. Like if some threatening person runs up to you and is pointing a gun at you, you don't have to wait for him to pull the trigger in order to fight back and defend yourself. If it's an objective threat, if it's a credible threat, then you can make the first move because if you don't, he's going to make the first move. And Israel, I think, is fully justified in thinking that it faces these objective, credible threats from surrounding countries. So if it engages in a preemptive attack, it's self-defense. It's not a war of aggression. If these countries had been acting peacefully towards it across the decades, and not saying that um, they want to destroy Israel, then Israel would not be justified in just firing missiles at them. I don't think this is difficult. Um, so I don't know if you can honestly hold this view. If you really don't know what's going on, then you might think something like this, but then, why are you commenting on this? Um, Matthew Stroud says context dropping error. Yeah. Um, CPG is putting in many more uh, chats and many more messages in the chat. Uh, Let me just read some of these, at least silently here. Um, they're coming in every few seconds. Maybe you could slow down and just write one longer chat instead of one every few seconds. It might be a little easier to keep up with and follow. So I welcome people to participate in the chat, just as long as you're civil, be respectful. Otherwise, you could get blocked. You say there's a character limit? Yeah, but it's much longer than what you're typing there. You're typing chats with like 3 words, 5 words, 10 words. I think you have up to like 200 characters. You can go like uh, many of these chats could be grouped into a single, much larger chat. It's I guess if they come at a slower rate, then it'll be easier for me to process them. All right, so I see we got several people here watching. Thanks for being here, and thanks for the likes too. I definitely appreciate the likes on the stream, not just because it helps this in the algorithm, although it does, but also just I like knowing that people appreciate this. So thank you for those. All right, let me try to read some of these from CPG. Now that there's a pause, maybe I can get through some of these. How is a preemptive strike self-defense? Okay, I think I already answered that. It's not arbitrary, it's based on facts. Iran is funding terrorist groups that threaten Israel, and they themselves have a nuclear program that is a threat to Israel. If you want a lot more details on this, check out Yaron Brook show, Yaron, because he knows a lot more about this topic than I do. He's been talking about it publicly for decades. Uh, so if you want much more coverage of someone who knows a lot more about this, then I highly recommend the Yaron Brook show and also the Ayn Rand Institute, uh, which has its own YouTube channel. So Yaron Brook is the chairman of the board of directors at the Ayn Rand Institute, but Ayn Rand Institute has its own separate channel on YouTube, and they have a whole other set of commentators. Elon Giorno is the person there who specializes in foreign policy issues, especially in the Middle East. He's written a couple books, or maybe three books, or maybe editor or the author of three books about foreign policy in the Middle East. Onkar Ghate is another commentator there. So there's a lot of material um, on their website, on their podcast. So I definitely recommend checking them out. I can just give you a little commentary on it relatively because, as I said, that's not my specialty, but I can say a little bit about it at least. Um, so let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, we're getting some longer ones from CPG, and Matthew Stroud is also coming in. All right, let me try to catch up here. CPG, he says Israel has nukes actually stolen from the US. Really? I thought they did not have nukes. I think that's what I heard. So I don't know where you're getting that from. Iran isn't pointing a gun at Israel. Well, they're developing nuclear weapons, are they not? And they plausibly would use them against Western countries like Israel, would they not? Don't they chant death to America and death to Israel? And they called it, America the Great Satan, and Israel is the little Satan. Um, what baffles me, says CBG, is that you believe in economic freedom, except when it applies to Iran, Lebanon, Palestine, and Syria. Nope. I believe in economic freedom for everyone. We're talking about a brutal theocratic regime that forces women to veil themselves, that funds terrorists. Come on. And I think there are many people in Iran who would probably be happy to have the mullahs, isn't that the name? The what they call them, the leaders of Iran, overthrown. And sometimes there are protests from Iranians of people who are being oppressed by their regime. And then you say, dude, Israel occupied Lebanon for 18 years. All right. I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, Or was it, isn't Hezbollah based up there in Lebanon, and they use that as a basis for attacking Israel? If so, then you're justified in the name of self-defense of going in there and trying to root out whoever's using it as a base to attack you. If they were peaceful, if they didn't pose any threat to Israel, then Israel would not be justified in going up there and occupying the place. But if they are a source of attack, then I think they are justified. All right. And I got up to his first longer chat at 1:16 p.m. Pacific. Um, he says, okay, I'll put it this way. Israel has collectively punished a civilian population for 18 years. They had a larger drop in GDP proportionally than the US experienced during the 29 crash. All right, so I can't really comment on that, the details of this, but again, go check out Yaron Brook and the Ayn Rand Institute. I'm sure they could give they could talk a long time about these things. I mean, I do like you all being here, so I'm not trying to say leave. I mean, the point of me doing this show is because I'm trying to build my own audience, but I also don't want to talk beyond my knowledge base. So I want to be clear that if there's some issue that you all are interested in and that I'm not a specialist in, then I want to refer you to other sources that are specialists. But I'll do what I can. But I'm just trying to stay within my knowledge base here. All right. And then he says, you say this is acceptable because Gaza is a threat, in quotes, even though Israel has murdered more civilians. It's not consistent. It makes no sense, and it's tendentious. All right. I think that's a smear. They're not murdering people. Murdering means trying to destroy them without justification. If when Israel kills people, like if it uses weapons, missiles against Gaza and innocent people are killed, they're not targeting those people. They're targeting the military, the leadership. And if sometimes civilians get killed in the crossfire, that's what happens in war, especially when Hamas is hiding behind them as human shields, which they do intentionally, knowing that the West being is not morally clear about this, and the West has a conscience, and they hesitate to do things that will end up in civilians dying. But I don't think Hamas cares about that. But they don't target civilians. But Hamas does target civilians. That is their goal. Not so with Israel. So casualties in a war doesn't mean you're murdering someone. It's tragic, if innocent people die. But that's what happens in war. And the responsibility, the moral responsibility of that is on the aggressors in the war, which is not Israel. It's Hamas and Islamic terrorists. And if you want to debate that, we could debate that. But that's what I think based on what I've learned about this conflict. Okay, then we get one from Matthew Stroud. He says the concrete bound mentality, empiricism, pragmatism, and the divorce from rational principle. Just a few parts of the error cluster committed and typical of libertarians. Okay, so he's criticizing libertarians. And I don't call myself a libertarian. I try to distance myself from libertarians. And I've mentioned that many times on my show. because I think a lot of the libertarians, they're anti-state, not just anti-stateism, where the state is all powerful or authoritarian. Um, and I think because they are anti-state and they call themselves I think many are anarchists. Some call themselves anarcho-capitalists or ANCAPs. They're against the state, and I think maybe that's why they are. Many of them, at least, are hostile to good states, like, or relatively speaking, good states at least, like Israel and the United States. I would say these are states that protect people's rights to a much better degree, to a much larger degree than I think many other places in the world. And if there's an example of a successful state, then libertarians might be particularly keen to attack them because if their ideology is anti-state, then they don't want any examples that show actually you can have a good society where you do have a state and a government. Um, Maybe if the states are bad, then they don't need to attack them as much because that fits in line with their narrative, their thesis about how the state is bad. But if there are examples of states that function pretty well, then maybe those are more of a threat to the libertarian view. So more of their wrath is directed um, to relatively successful states. Ayn Rand was very much pro-government and pro-state if it's properly limited to the functions of protecting people from physical force. And she distanced herself from the libertarians. She called them hippies of the right. That was a phrase she used in an excerpt from one of her articles. All right, let me go on a little more here. Hi, John. John Wayne is here. Oh, and Kutababa is here. Hello. All right, so then I was up to actually, you know what? Since I was just commenting about Ayn Rand's view of libertarianism, I think I want to share that on the screen. I think that might be good to do. I'm going to go to the Ayn Rand campus. There's a site, campus.aynrand.org. And within that site, when I clicked on that, it took me to courses.aynrand.org. Maybe the URLs have been reorganized. Anyways, within that, actually, here, let me just make it its own window, and then I'll share this window because this is a good resource for people. All right, let me try to share my screen, at least this window in my screen. Here we go. Okay. All right. So this is the courses.aynrand.org site. And within that site, these are the subtabs. ARU, that's Ayn Rand University. That's one of their educational programs, which I was part of. Although when I was part of it, it was called OAC, the Objectivist Academic Center. But a few years ago, they reorganized it, and it's now Ayn Rand University. But also, there is this resource, the Ayn Rand Lexicon, which was edited by a philosopher, Harry Binswanger. It takes a bunch of excerpts from Ayn Rand's works, and uh, they're organized by topic and they're arranged alphabetically. So you have the here Ayn Rand Lexicon, Objectivism from A to Z, edited by Harry Binswanger. This mini encyclopedia of objectivism covering some 400 topics in philosophy, economics, psychology, and history is compiled from Ayn Rand's works. So this used to just be available as a book and came out in 1986, I think, a few years after Ayn Rand died. But it's now all available for free online. So I think it's a great resource. So you can look at what did Ayn Rand have to say about any of these topics? So, what did she have to say about abortion? What did she have to say about absolutes, um, altruism, America, all these things? And so you can just scroll down here through all these topics. These are just, you click on any one of them. Like, what did she have to say about conservatives? You click on that, and then here's an excerpt from her article "Choose Your Issues" in the Objectivist newsletter, January 1962. So there's a few paragraphs from that article. Objectivists are not conservatives. We are radicals for capitalism. Okay, and then here's another excerpt related to conservatives from her book Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. The essay Conservatism and Obituary. So you get all these passages. So if you're interested in learning what she had to say on the topic of conservatives, you can go to this website and find all these excerpts from her writings. So this is a great resource. So what I'm going to do, and you look at related topics like over here on the right. So maybe that'll get you interested in libertarians. Hey, look at that. There's a link right there to the libertarians, which is what I wanted to go to. So let me click on that. Let's see what she had to say about libertarians. All right, so I'm going to read this from her article, The Objectivist, in her magazine, The Objectivist, and the article is titled Brief Summary. Quote, for the record, I shall repeat what I have said many times before. I do not join or endorse any political group or movement. More specifically, disagree with, and have no connection with the latest aberration of some conservatives, the so-called hippies of the right, who attempt to snare the younger or more careless ones of my readers by claiming simultaneously to be followers of my philosophy and advocates of anarchism. Anyone offering such a combination confesses his inability to understand either, that is, either her philosophy or anarchism. Continuing the quote, anarchism is the most irrational anti-intellectual notion ever spun by the concrete-bound, context-dropping, whim-worshipping fringe of the collectivist movement, where it properly belongs. Okay, so she doesn't use the term libertarian there. She uses this phrase "hippies of the right," but maybe they hadn't adopted that label yet. This is September 1971. In 1971, I think was when the Libertarian Party was first formed. So maybe they hadn't adopted the label libertarian yet for their viewpoint. But I think it does come up maybe in this next quote. Yeah, it comes up in this next quote. This is from her article, "What Can One Do?" in the book Philosophy Who Needs It. I don't know what year that was. The book came out in 1982, but the article came out earlier. I'm not sure what year it is. So from that article, "What Can One Do?" she says, this is about like how to make the world better, and including how to make it more capitalist, as Ayn Rand understands it, because that's one of her goals is to have the world become capitalist, not a mixed economy, rather become more aligned with the principle of freedom. So here's what she says in her article, "What Can One Do?" Quote, above all, do not join the wrong ideological groups or movements in order to, quote, do something. By ideological in this context, I mean groups or movements proclaiming some vaguely generalized, undefined, and usually contradictory political goals. For example, the Conservative Party, which subordinates reason to faith and substitutes theocracy for capitalism, or the, quote, libertarian, unquote, hippies, who subordinate reason to whims and substitute anarchism for capitalism. To join such groups means to reverse the philosophical hierarchy and to sell out fundamental principles for the sake of some superficial political action, which is bound to fail. It means that you help the defeat of your ideas and the victory of your enemies. For a discussion of the reasons, see The Anatomy of Compromise in my book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Okay, so there she does actually use the term libertarian, and she links it with the word hippies, which we saw in the previous quote, hippies of the right. So there's good evidence there that, that's what she's talking about. She's talking about the libertarians in that first quote. All right, and then I'll just read one more. This is the last one on this page. And this is by a different author. This is by Harry Benswanger, who, as I mentioned, he's an objectivist philosopher who compiled this mini encyclopedia, the Ayn Rand lexicon. And there was a Q&A section in a magazine that he started called the Objectivist Forum. That was started, I think, was it 1980 or 1981? Um, and there's a Q&A in there in one of the August 1981 issue about anarchism. And here's what Harry Benswanger says in that article. And this magazine was endorsed by Ayn Rand. She wrote a introductory piece for it in the very first issue of the magazine. So she knew Harry Benswanger. They were friends, at least in the last few years of her life. She died in 1982. Towards the end of her life, Harry Benswanger was a friend of hers, and she endorsed his magazine or his periodical. So here's what Harry Benswanger wrote. Quote, "The libertarians plagiarize Ayn Rand's principle that no man may initiate the use of physical force and treat it as a mystically revealed, out of context absolute. In the philosophical battle for a free society, the one crucial connection to be upheld is that between capitalism and reason. The religious conservatives are seeking to tie capitalism to mysticism. The libertarians are tying capitalism to the whim-worshipping subjectivism and chaos of anarchy. To cooperate with either group is to betray capitalism, reason, and one's own future." All right, so there's some pretty strong language there distancing Ayn Rand and her philosophy from libertarians. And uh, hopefully that gives you a better idea of why I sometimes say things that distance myself from the libertarians. Um, Maybe this will end up in the title. I'll say something about libertarianism in the title because I've been going on about this for a while now. And I try to feature the most important topics that come up in my live stream. But all right, well, I'm glad I got to do a little segment on that. All right, I'm going to stop this screen share now and come back to the chat. Here we go. Okay, so looks like we've got some more chats from Kudababa and CPG. Looks like yeah, I just see chats from them. But anyways, the just a reminder, the phone lines are open. So if anyone wants to call in, the instructions on how to do it are pinned in the chat. But if there aren't any callers, I'm just going to keep engaging with the chat. Just going to get a sip of water. Mm. All right. Where did I leave off? Okay, yeah, I read this one from Matthew Stroud about libertarians. Right. That's what that's what led me to start talking about libertarians because Matthew Stroud mentioned libertarians in his chat. That was at 1:18 p.m. Pacific. So now I'm going on to the next chat, which is CPG. Maybe I'll try to read through these quicker. Otherwise, I don't think I'm ever going to catch up to the current chats. So let me try to go through these quicker. CPG says, if you believe they can be targeted, then so too could the reservists that were killed on October 7th. It's a slippery slope. All right, I'm not sure what you mean by that. You mean Israeli reservists? Uh, if that is what you mean, I don't see the justification there because I think Israel is not an aggressor. I think they're in a position of self-defense. Then CPG says Yaron Brook doesn't believe that civilian casualties matter in the moral landscape. I've read his opinion piece on it. Um, well, I don't think he would say civilian casualties should stop you from attacking an aggressor nation, but I don't think he would say like it doesn't matter in the sense that it's not tragic. I think he would say innocent civilian deaths are tragic. So it's unfortunate, uh, but it's a necessary consequence of having to carry out a war of self-defense sometimes. So in what sense don't they matter? In a sense, they don't matter. In a sense, they do matter. They don't matter to how you should prosecute the war necessarily. I mean, even there, they could matter to an extent. Like you shouldn't. I don't think there's a good reason to target innocent civilians. I think that's a bad thing. If you know there's innocent civilians somewhere, then I think it's bad to target. But I don't think that's what Iran would endorse. I think he would say attack the military installations, and if civilians die in the crossfire, if innocent civilians die in the crossfire, as opposed to civilians who are not innocent, who are morally supporting, maybe somehow helping, cheering on the aggressors. Well, I don't think it's. I'm not gonna. I don't think I'm gonna cry over them. They're probably happy, if innocent people are dying on the other side. But if there are genuine, and I think many people in Gaza, I think many of the Palestinians support Hamas in their war of aggression. Maybe a majority of them support the destruction of Israel. So I'm not really sad if those people who would want Israelis or Americans killed, I'm not really sad if they get killed. But if there are genuinely innocent people, then that is sad. That's a tragedy, which is the fault of the aggressor nation. Okay. Uh, then CBG says, look at the Apollo affair. I don't know what that is. Maybe I'll Google that later. Israel most definitely has nukes, he says. Okay. Um, I don't know about that, but I'll have to verify that whether that's true independently. Um, all right, I'm not going to read all these. Let me read this one from Kudababa. He says, "Isn't it horrible how Israel throws those nukes around willy-nilly? LOL." So I guess he's just being sarcastic there. Yeah, I think uh, Israel, Iran has made this point that Israel has been too concerned to its own detriment of being careful about killing civilian casualties. I think the ratio of civilian to combatant deaths is um, relatively low compared to other wars. And I think Iran has said Israel is being too careful, and it's costing itself to the detriment of its own um, citizens, I guess. Especially like if you have if they're hiding behind civilians and you have a very densely populated place like Gaza, then there are going to be civilian casualties. But again, the moral responsibility for that is on the aggressors, which I think is Hamas, not Israel. And then let's see what else we have here. CBG says the only reason they have a theocracy is because of USA coups and destabilization in the first place. Uh, okay, I don't know about that. There was it in the 50s? There was a coup against, what was that guy's name? Mossadegh, the Iranian who was he the one who tried to nationalize the oil? Was it the British oil then? Um, I'll have to brush up on my history then. I don't remember the details. CPG says, why do you keep denying facts? Obviously, I'm not trying to deny facts. I mean, if you think I'm mistaken about something, you can say you're wrong about this, but it's not like I I know something to be a fact and I'm just asserting that's not a fact. I mean, that's just blatant dishonesty. So, um, that's I think that's an unjustified comment. Um, and then you say Israel invaded in 1982 and left in 2000. You mean Lebanon, I guess. Yaron actually was involved in that, I think. Because Yaron Brook he was in the Israeli military, which has conscription, unfortunately. I think that's one of the problems in Israel, one of the flaws. So it's not a perfect country. I think it's better. It's more rights respecting than the surrounding countries, but it does have a military draft. And I think everyone is required to serve at least for uh, a few years. And I think that's a problem. That's a real violation of individual rights, and that should um, that should change. But Iran was in the Israeli military at the time of the this 1982 invasion of Lebanon, and he's talked about this in some of his shows. If you do a search on his channel for Israel and Lebanon, you might hear about it. Um, then you say the UN condemned it, the invasion of Lebanon. I don't really care what the UN does. I think the UN is a corrupt organization and it has nations like Russia on its Security Council. So if the UN actually cares about rights, does it make sense to have authoritarian regimes on its highest um, committee within it? Um, why are you, and then you say, why are you being an apologist for aggression? Okay, this is just smears. I made clear from the beginning that I think this is a war of self-defense. Um, now, if you want to disagree with me with that, we could debate that, but you can't just assume that I'm going to agree that I'm endorsing aggression and that I think I'm apologizing for that. That's obviously not my view. And if you say things like this, I might just block you because I don't think that's really helpful to a productive discussion to say things like I'm denying facts or I'm an apologist for aggression, which I think is bullshit. If you want to argue that it actually is aggression, um, we could argue that, I guess, to some extent, but you can't just assume that I'm going to agree with your analysis there or your evaluation of what I'm doing and then ask a loaded question based on it. So when you say, why do you keep denying facts? That loads in, it assumes that I am denying facts, and then you just assume that. And then you ask, why are you being an apologist for aggression? Assuming that I am. And the only question is why. You have to back up a step. And if you want to debate, am I? And then at first we can establish whether that's true. And if you establish that true, then we can ask, why am I doing such and that's okay. But you haven't done the first step. Okay. So you're jumping ahead of yourself. You're putting the cart before the horse. You're going out of order here and using that as a basis. You're smuggling in criticisms by smuggling in these assumptions to your questions, which I reject. These are loaded questions. That's a fallacy. Um, what was I going to? Oh, yeah, I wanted to go back to the Ayn Rand lexicon because you mentioned the UN. So I thought it would be good to see what Ayn Rand has to say about the UN. So let me go back to that. Let me share my screen again. There we go. All right, that's where I was on the libertarian page. So let me now go back to the table of contents and go to U for the United Nations. Here we go. All right, so here's a few paragraphs from Ayn Rand's her article, The Anatomy of Compromise. She says, quote, psychologically, the UN has contributed a great deal to the gray swamp of demoralization, of cynicism, bitterness, hopelessness, fear, and nameless guilt, which is swallowing the Western world. But the communist world has gained a moral sanction, a stamp of civilized respectability from the Western world. It has gained the West's assistance in deceiving its victims. It has gained the status and prestige of an equal partner, thus establishing the notion that the difference between human rights and mass slaughter is merely a difference of political opinion. The declared goal of the communist countries is the conquest of the world. What they stand to gain from a collaboration with the relatively free countries is the latter's material, financial, scientific, and intellectual resources. The free countries have nothing to gain from the communist countries. Therefore, the only form of common policy or compromise possible between two such parties is the policy of property owners who make piecemeal concessions to an armed thug in exchange for his promise not to rob them. The UN has delivered a larger part of the globe's surface and population into the power of Soviet Russia than Russia could ever hope to conquer by armed force. The treatment accorded to Katanga versus the treatment accorded to Hungary is a sufficient example of UN policies. An institution allegedly formed for the purpose of using the united might of the world to stop an aggressor has become means of using the united might of the world to force the surrender of one helpless country after another into the aggressor's power. Who but a concrete bound epistemological savage could have expected any other results from such a, quote, experiment in collaboration? What would you expect from a crime fighting committee whose board of directors included the leading gangsters of the community? Unquote. All right, so um, there you get a flavor of Rand's perspective on the UN. There's a reference in there to some things that were going on at the time, I guess, which I have no idea what they refer to. Katanga and Hungary. Um, I don't know when this was written. Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. This book came out in 1965, I believe, or 1966, around there. So maybe something was going on in the 1960s that she's referring to there. But anyway, here I'll just read. There's one more entry in the lexicon on the UN, so I'll just read that. She says, this is from her article in the Ayn Rand letter titled the Shanghai gesture. I guess this is when Nixon went to visit Shanghai. I think no U.S. president had visited China, or since it became communist, at least. But I guess Nixon eventually did visit there. So maybe that's a reference to Nixon's visit to China. Okay, but here's what she says in that article. Quote, when an institution reaches the degree of corruption, brazen cynicism, and dishonor demonstrated by the UN in its shameful history, to discuss it at length is to imply that its members and supporters may possibly be making an innocent error about its nature, which is no longer possible. There is no margin of error about a monstrosity that was created for the alleged purpose of preventing wars by uniting the world against any aggressor, but proceeded to unite it against any victim of aggression. The expulsion of a charter member, the Republic of China, in action forbidden by the UN's own charter, was a, quote, moment of truth, a naked display of the UN's soul. Is that a reference to Taiwan, the Republic of China? I think maybe that's what that is. And then she goes on, what was Red China's qualification for membership in the UN? The fact that her government seized power by force and has maintained it for 22 years by terror. What disqualified nationalist China? The fact that she was a friend of the United States. All right. So that's it for Ayn Rand on the UN. I'm going to stop this screen share now and come back to the chat. All right. If you're just joining the stream, thanks for coming by. We are talking about current events, which I didn't know we were going to be talking about as much as we have been today. But we started out, I said a little bit about Israel, and then that got the triggered some comments in the chat, and then I talked about Israel for a while, and then that's the various things have come up in the chat, the libertarians and the UN. So I thought it would be good to share some of what Ayn Rand had to say about those topics, since my show is all about promoting Ayn Rand and her philosophy of objectivism. So thanks everyone for participating in the chat. Thanks for the likes, subscribes, shares. All right, looks like got some more comments from CPG and Matthew Stroud. Kudababa. Where did I leave off? Oh yeah, I was up to around where John Wayne came in at 1:24 p.m. Pacific. All right, let me look through some more of these. CPG says, what about aid workers and EMTs who were buried? Again, these aren't smears. Okay. Also, I don't think Hamas is the trustworthy source. So I don't know where you're getting your news from, CPG, but I've seen like the BBC even being reporting what Hamas says about casualty figures or about this or that. But who cares, right? I don't think that's worth anything. If you're a murderous organization, then are you a trustworthy source? I don't think so. So I think any any claims made by Hamas cannot be taken at face value. You have to independently verify whatever is claimed if you decide it's even worth investigating at all. Uh, John says, "Hey CBG, how come Hamas doesn't surrender?" Yeah, if they surrendered, this could all be over, and then there would be no more civilian casualties. But if maybe the point is to have civilian casualties, whether on their own side or the other, they don't care if they're using them as human shields. Okay, I don't think this is about religion. It's about rights and respecting rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And I think Israel does a better job at respecting those rights than does Hamas, to put it mildly. It's not about, one has this religion, another has that religion. It's about who's respecting individual rights. Um, and if you're an Arab, you can even serve in the parliament in Israel. So I don't think they're distinguishing uh, like some. I think this claim that there's apartheid, um, I think that's likely just a smear. If you consider the sorts of rights that Arabs citizens have in Israel, if it's occupied territory, maybe the rules are different because you have hostile threats over there. Um, but at least in peaceful areas, I think people have the same rights. Okay, let me. That was it. That was just a reply to something CPG said at 126. Let me open this chat in a different window that I think is a little easier to read. Indiscriminate bombing campaign. CPG, come on. Really? Indiscriminate? You don't think they're targeting military installations or the leadership of Hamas or nuclear facilities in Iran? What are you talking about, indiscriminate? Okay, just reading some more here. CPG says you apparently can't use Hamas in the chat. It censors you. There are certain words that might trigger the YouTube algorithm to not post the chat, and yeah, maybe Hamas is one of those. So he just put at signs in place of the A's, H at sign M at sign S, and then that got through at least. I haven't done that, tried that myself, so I I haven't experimented with that. She says you can't use hummus in the chat, maybe because YouTube treats that as a typo for Hamas. Kudababa says howdy. Hello, Kudababa. CPG says, hey Dan, you should have a discussion with a Palestinian. I would love to see the reaction when you say that they are aggressors, don't have the right to a state or the right to defend themselves. I don't think I said anything about Palestinians. Didn't I say that about Hamas? Now, it might be true of some Palestinians, like the sympathizers, the ones who sympathize with Hamas, that maybe you could consider them collaborators, at least with aggressors, if they're like providing a safe haven for Hamas. But I have no problem with Palestinians if they're peaceful, if they're not promoting aggression. He says I would actually pay for that content if you had a super chat. I would like to get super chat. I need to get up to 1,000 subscribers. So if you all out there haven't subscribed, I do have a lot of people who listen who are not subscribed. So if some of you all want to help me get my channel monetized, you can subscribe to my channel. I would definitely appreciate that. And then once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm uh, somewhere in the 860s right now, 866 subscribers last I checked. But it fluctuates, goes up and down. Sometimes people unsubscribe, but the general trend is upward direction. And once I hit 1,000, then I can apply to YouTube to have my channel monetized, and then I can start taking super chats. So I'd love to get there, and you all can help me get there by subscribing if you're not subscribed. Uh, CBG says the U.S. killed over 1 million in Iraq and Afghanistan collectively. Really? That sounds like a lot. That's hard for me to believe. Maybe I should quickly Google that. I mean, if they did kill people, I I wouldn't say it was murder. I think it was well, I do think the Iraq war is bad. I don't think that was a good target. I think Iran would have been a better target. There was this narrative about weapons of mass destruction. I mean, I don't think Saddam Hussein was a good guy. I think he was a brutal dictator and he deserved to be overthrown, but I just don't think it was the right war for the US to engage in at the time because I don't think they really posed much of a threat to the U.S. Um, but in like Afghanistan, which was harboring terrorists, Al Qaeda, I think it was legitimate to target them, or at least wherever Al Qaeda was hanging out. But I don't think that was the head of the snake, so to speak, of Islamic terrorism. I think Iran was the head of the snake, so I think that would be a better target. So I'm glad that there's Israel now is uh, targeting Iran, and I think the U.S. should have targeted Iran long ago. Yaron Brook was saying on his show how he thinks it's unfortunate that the U.S. was not leading the charge against Iran. And it should have started. He should have done something way back in 1979 when they took his hostages. But any deaths in these wars against these harbors of terrorists, I think you can call them civilian civilian casualties that are the fault of the aggressors, which is not the U.S. All right, I was just going to Google the number of deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan. Let me look up number of casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan war with US. Okay, so here's the AI overview from Google. This is using casualties on the American side. What I want is the casualties on the other side. Um, okay, so for civilian casualties in Iraq, it says estimates for Iraqi civilian deaths vary. The Iraq Body Count Project, for example, has documented a range of at least 185,194 through 208,167 violent civilian deaths through June 2020. Afghanistan, one estimate suggests approximately 43,000 Afghan civilians were killed in the war. That's way under 1 million. So I don't know if you're what your source is. Are you including military deaths? Even if you include those, it still strikes me that 1 million is very high. Um, I just looked up the Wikipedia article on U.S. military casualties in the war in Afghanistan. Okay, that's the American side. Now, what about the other side? Um, the war in Afghanistan killed 176,000 people, 46,000 civilians, 69,000 military and police, 52,000 opposition fighters. I'm rounding these numbers, but this is way under 1 million. Let me go to Iraq. Let me go to the Wikipedia page. Casualties of the Iraq War. Population-based studies produce estimates of the number of Iraq War casualties ranging from 151,000 violent deaths as of June 2006 to 1,033,000 excess deaths. Wow, that's quite a range. From 150,000 to a little bit over 1 million. That's a large range. Other surveys find 461,000 total deaths as of June 2011 and 655,000 total deaths as of June 2006. Okay, so I guess there have been different studies of this. It looks like most of them are well under 1 million. There's one which provides a range that goes from 150,000 up to 1,033,000. So um, it doesn't look like you can confidently assert at this point definitively that over 1 million deaths occurred. So I'm skeptical that of that number. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I would say it does not look likely given the various studies that I just found in a quick Google search. Um, then Kudababa says, "I still see you, CBG." Maybe CBG thought he got blocked, so he was wondering if anyone else could still see him. I haven't blocked you. Not yet, at least. We'll see. I mean, if you make up facts or then that might get you blocked. This one, it's not, I mean, you didn't say like the US killed over 10 million. Maybe that would get you blocked because it's just so outrageous. But here you have at least one study which at least puts you in the range of what I found. But you're putting this forth in like as a definitive certain claim, which it doesn't seem justified based on what I've just found that you could assert it with that kind of strength. Kudababa says you said over 1 million in Iraq and Afghanistan, so maybe he's challenging this claim as well. What's even weirder is that now your last few posts have vanished. LOL. Oh, you must have deleted them. Yeah, I see a couple, actually three message retracted from CUDA from CPG. Yeah, you can delete your comments. Yeah, and then he says he deleted them. I don't think it'll show up in the live chat replay. Like after the stream, once YouTube processes the video and it displays the live chat replay, I don't think it'll display like what you can see now it shows message retracted, but I don't think that'll show up on the live chat replay later. Matthew Stroud says, Dan, I was critiquing CPG's posts. Okay. According to the search I just did, it says Kutababa about 250,000 civilians died in Afghanistan and Iraq. Okay, so looks like Kutababa was just doing the same kind of research I was doing. Um, oh, then CPG says the upper estimate is in the million range. Okay. Well, the initial comment didn't say it was just an upper estimate of a range. It just said the U.S. killed over a million in Iraq and Afghanistan collectively. It didn't say the upper range of what the U.S. killed was over a million. So I think that's an important qualification. Matthew Stroud says they never break out of concretes to and fro and get into wider context and rational principles that obviously apply but are ignored. I think both levels are important, both the concrete level and the abstractions. But abstractions are derived from concretes. You start with the concretes and then you derive abstractions from them. Otherwise, the abstractions are floating and they're not based on reality. So it's important that you have the concretes right. But I think a lot of times the concretes are not right. Like if you believe that a certain number of people were killed over a million, when in fact that's not the case, or it's only an estimate of the upper range, then that's maybe you'll draw some invalid abstractions from that alleged fact. So it's important to get the facts right. And if you get too many wrong, and if it seems like you're being reckless about them and reporting them, then maybe that could get you blocked because I don't want to have like just misinformation being spewed on this platform. I want to have this be a good source. So if it becomes too much of a problem, then I might have to block some people. But hasn't gotten to the point yet where I'm going to block someone, but maybe it will. It makes me at least skeptical, based on what I've seen so far from CPG, then I lose some confidence on what he says in the future based on what I've found about certain claims so far. But I'm glad he at least put in the qualification later about it being a upper estimate. So that's good. I do think there's that if you have the wrong abstractions, they can also color your interpretation of the concretes, or maybe they'll make you seek out certain concretes rather than others. Like if you already have this idea that Israel is an aggressor nation, then maybe you'll focus more on evidence that supports that. I guess that's a confirmation bias. I think that's what it's called sometimes. Mm. But I do think there's an interaction between the level of concretes and the level of abstractions. It's not just a one-way influence. And exactly what the dynamics are between those levels, I think maybe it can get complicated. Kuda Baba says exactly, Matthew. CBG says US UN has nations like US on its council. Yeah, but I think that's part of the problem is it gives cover to bad nations by saying, "Oh, look, U.S. and Soviet Russia, they're both on the same council. So maybe the U.S. that maybe Soviet Russia can't be that bad if they're cooperating with the U.S. in this council." I think that's part of the problem. Is that there's this blurring of there's this moral equivalence going on, and that's why I think the UN is at least one reason why I think it's a corrupt organization is it blurs these moral differences, and I think the UN should withdraw from sorry the US should withdraw from the UN and should not host it on in New York City. Then Matthew Stroud says to Kuda Baba, thanks. It makes listening to debates quite painful. Yes. Kuda Baba says, yeah, it's sometimes hard to listen to people debate online. Seems futile sometimes. All right. Okay, good. With 7 people watching now, it says 6 likes. Thanks for the likes. If anyone else wants to join in, I'd be happy to engage with your chat. I'm engaging with the people who are in chat now. Um, but I like to see any, I welcome other people, or if anyone wants to call in, uh, the lines are open. Let's see. Let me take a quick look at my notes. I had some other things that I said I thought I might talk about if I didn't have anything else to talk about, but I have had other things to talk about based on what's been going on in the chat. Yeah, maybe I'll save these for another time. These notes I'm looking at now, and yeah, I do think I want to give priority to the stuff in chat now because I do appreciate people being here for the live show. I see some glare on my glasses. I just turned down my the brightness of my screen so it doesn't reflect off my glasses. You can watch it. I'm going to turn it all the way up now so you can see like how the change is in my eye. You see there's like a little white stripe over my eye because part of my screen is bright. Like the zoom part of my screen is pretty dark, so you don't see that, but there's a rectangle that has a little bit of blue in it from another part of my screen, and that's reflecting off my glasses. But now I'm going to turn down the brightness, and then you can see the reflection go away. It's all the way down now. It's dark. I can't see anything on my screen now. But I'm going to turn it up a little bit at least so I can read my own screen. I need a little contrast, but hopefully it's not going to cover my eye too much. Um, all right, let me come back to the chat. Maybe I should jump ahead and look at the current chats. I was reading chats from like half an hour ago, trying to catch up, but um, looking at the current chats now, CPG says, Dan, do me a favor and look up Feroz Sidwa on his time in Gaza. You'd be appalled. Okay. I'll Google Feroz Sidwa right now and see what I find. Feroz Sidwa. Who is Let me go to his Wikipedia page if there is one. Get a quick intro. World Socialist website is what popped up when I put in Feroz Sidwa Wiki. The first thing that popped up was from the World Socialist website, interview with Dr. Feroz Sidwa, organizer of Open Letters. Well, if socialists are sympathetic to this guy, then maybe he's a socialist, which isn't a great start for giving me confidence in his objectivity. But um, I can't make a final judgment just on seeing this one little thing, but it's a data point. But where's the Wikipedia? Maybe Wikipedia doesn't have an article on him because I didn't see one pop up. The first Wikipedia hit that came up was Israeli war crimes in the Gaza war. That's the title of it. So maybe he's featured in that article. Burroughs. In an interview with Mother Jones, which I believe is a socialist website, or left wing at least, which I think is attacked Ayn Rand, if I recall correctly. Dr. Feroz Sidwa explained the circumstances of the children's death, stating on the occasion when the child survived long enough and there was family to ask what happens, they would say the kids were just playing. I never heard from a family that they were in a crossfire. So that's all it says in this one Wikipedia article about Feroz Sidwa. Maybe I'll look into it more later. CPG says, look at the New York Times article he wrote. Kudababa says, the clues are piling up. Yeah, if your only sources are Mother Jones and the World Socialists website or whatever that was called, yeah, World Socialist website, then that's looking pretty suspicious to me. But he's also got a New York Times piece. Okay. Um, oh, it says let me empty my computer trash. It says my disk is almost full. Hopefully that doesn't mess this stream up. Right, there's not a lot of trash to empty. I just emptied one thing. Ugh, these superficial judgments are maddening. Well, they're initial judgments. I'm not ruling him out. I'm not saying like there's nothing worthwhile to know about this guy or to read. I'm just saying some initial signs don't bode very well. But I'm not making a conclusive judgment about that. And I think I indicated that. And as I said before, like if your source is Hamas for something, then I have no credit that offers no credibility in my judgment. And I don't think you're being superficial for dismissing a source like Hamas. Now, I'm not going to put socialists or Mother Jones in the same category as Hamas, but I'm also not going to put it in a good category. I do have some level of suspicion based on, like I've said, they've attacked Ayn Rand's, something like place like Mother Jones, and socialism is diametrically opposed to my views on politics. So if the only sources I see for something are those two, that's what pops up first, then it makes me kind of suspicious, and I think justifiably so. I'm not drawing a final judgment about it, though. Maybe I'll look at it later. CBG says, just look at the article. If I have time, later, maybe I will. But I have a huge reading list, and I don't have a subscription to the New York Times. And I think there's only a certain amount of I think you can see some articles for free, but after like 5 articles or something, you can't see free articles anymore. And I think I've already hit that limit, so I don't think I can even read the New York Times article. Um, but um, maybe at some point in the future, I will look more into it. All right, we've been going for about 90 minutes, and we've mostly just been talking about these Middle Eastern issues and I guess related topics that have come out of that, like the UN. Oh, Aaron Alfesh is here. Hi, Aaron. Your chat was buried here in the midst of a bunch of other chats. Uh, Aaron says, always the fault of the initiator of violence. I guess that's a reply to CPG, because I think CPG has been the only one here on the anti-Israel side. Matthew Stroud says, this is akin to Dr. Peikoff's, a picture is not an argument. Yeah, Leonard Peikoff, who is he's an objectivist philosopher who was Ayn Rand's student for many years, decades, and he was her top student. He gave a talk maybe from the 1980s or 1990s called "A Picture Is Not an Argument." I think a lot of times in the news there will be these pictures of suffering people, like in Palestine or somewhere in the Middle East, and the idea is to create sympathy for these people without giving a objective analysis that would allow you to evaluate the pictures. Um, and I think that was something like that idea was behind the this title of his article or his talk, "A Picture Is Not an Argument." And then CPG says there are sources in the article, not just pictures. Okay. Well, if it's an article, then it's already not just pictures, there's words. So he says, looking forward to hearing your take on the article. Thanks. If I do look at it, as I said, I have a long reading list. So I don't know if I'll ever get to it. Maybe I will. Maybe I could read it during stream sometime. I guess I might have more motivation to do that. There's just so much. My reading list is, for all practical purposes, it's infinitely long. Like right now, I'm reading about the Bible, so I'm like 2,000 years ago. So will I ever get up to this article? Maybe not, except for the fact that you're asking about it. That gives me some motivation because I do want to engage with chat and things that people here are interested in. So, um, but there's still a question of like when would I read it? And I'm thinking now that I might have more motivation to spend time on it if it's actually during the stream. So maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll look at it during the stream. Um, Simon, hello. We got another person here in the chat. He says, if you're anti-Israel, you just hate life. Hatred of the good for being the good. That's a phrase Ayn Rand used. Hatred of the good for being the good. That's a nihilistic kind of motivation. Like if you recognize something as good and then you hate it for that reason, that would be nihilistic. Then Simon says, Dan, have you read James Valiant's book on Christ? No, I have not. I did hear a talk about it, though. He was at an objectivist conference some years ago, and he gave a talk on his book. Creating Christ. I think that's the title of it. And he gave I guess he presented some of the key ideas in it in the book, but I haven't read the book itself. Um, I remember thinking the talk sounded interesting, but um, I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm learning more about it right now, but I don't have a level of expertise on it that I might need to evaluate that book. I think he might have given talks on it on various YouTube channels. Uh, Simon says, what crimes has Israel committed? You can just name a few. I guess he's talking to CPG there. CPG says, give me your email. I'll send you 10,000 words. Okay. Are these your own words? You can email me at theselfishnessproject@gmail.com. That's my email, or at least the one that I use for my channel. Because the theme of my channel was called, it was about selfishness. And I had a project which I called The Selfishness Project. All my original videos on my channel were about the topic of selfishness, which Ayn Rand is famous for promoting. She has a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. She has a very distinctive view of what selfishness means. And I wanted to introduce people to her ideas about selfishness. So I would go around campus. I was at university at the time, or in the town nearby the campus, and I would just interview people. And you can see these on my channel. So when I initially started my channel, since it was around this theme, I created an account, a Gmail account to get the channel going, and the email associated with the account is theselfishnessproject@gmail.com. And it just stuck with the channel. Maybe someday I'll update it to be more reflective of my channel today. Maybe if I were to start it over today, maybe I'd call it like the Dan Norton Show or just Dan Norton at gmail.com or something. But that's the email I'm using for now, at least. And you can also see it on the about section of my channel. There's a place you can click for more info, and if you forget what it is, you can find it there, or you can type it in a comment or something. You can ask for it, and I can let you know. But I've told you what it is now, so you can send me emails there. All right, so now CPG, I guess he's giving examples of Israel's crimes or alleged crimes, at least. Got to put that qualifier alleged in there because uh, I need to verify things for myself sometimes before I'm willing to uh, suggest that it's an actual thing. Thanks everyone for coming by. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for the shares. Thanks for the subscribes. Just taking a quick look at my analytics here. Okay, looking fine. All right, so next chat was by Kudababa. And if I didn't see your chat or if I didn't read it now during the stream, I will go back later, or at least after the stream, and read through them all. Kudababa says, I think it's a video or film as well, available on Amazon. Oh, the Creating Christ. There's a video of that or film. Then CBG says, making Gaza the child amputee capital of the world. Okay, well, just blame it on Hamas if that's true. Simon says, collective punishment. It's the government. Simon says, if your government enacts bad policies and you didn't vote for said government, it's collective punishment. Okay. I'm going to take a little break here just for a few minutes and then come back. So do feel free to keep chatting and maybe I'll respond to your chats when I get back. And do feel free to call in. But I'm just going to take a few minutes break here. So see you in a bit. I am back. Okay, let me see what's going on in the chat. If you are just joining, this is the Dan Norton Show. I discuss and debate from the perspective of Ayn Rand's philosophy, a philosophy of reason, egoism, and capitalism, and life and happiness. That's a big part of Ayn Rand's philosophy, which I put in the title today. I wanted to vary it up a little bit. So, see, we got Simon still going in the chat, Matthew Stroud, CPG, Kudababa. Looks like those are the main participants. And okay, so they're still debating Israel. Got 8 concurrent viewers, 7 likes. If anyone else is out there, feel free to jump in the chat. Just say hello. Doesn't have to be a comment or a question. You can just say hi. I like to know who's watching. But if you prefer to stay anonymous, that's fine. Just enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, I'd appreciate it if you give it a like and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Okay. Oh, I thought maybe I would look at that article, at least part of that article that CPG mentioned, since I think I'm more likely to find time for it and have motivation to look at it during the stream. Uh, well, actually, let me just catch up on the chat a little bit first. And oh, he left. Um, Simon says, I think he left. Um, his last chat was 6 minutes ago, so maybe he did leave because he was chatting pretty frequently. So if it's been 6 minutes, maybe he left, or maybe he just left because I left, for, and maybe he's gonna come back thinking my break is over. I guess we'll see soon. Oh, he says he's here. He just yeah, he just came back in the chat. I uh I assume it's a he. I guess that's my default assumption. Most people on YouTube, I think, are he's. It tells you in the analytics, actually. It gives you some breakdowns of male or female viewers, and vast majority are male. But Dootsie, who was here in a previous stream, actually said she's a female. So I'll have to correct that next time I see Dootsie. If any of you, maybe some of you remember her being here. Okay, Kudababa asks, Dan, have you watched the Andor series on Disney? No, I have not. He says, I think it's quite good, even if you're not a Star Wars fan. No, no, I don't watch TV or movies. I don't have a TV actually. I just use my internet. Um, but I guess you can get some TV shows on there through some programs. But I don't know if Disney is one. But anyways, no, I have not seen that. Um, I used to watch some TV and movies, but it's just been so long. I was a Star Wars fan of the original series for a bit um, as a kid, but yeah, I haven't kept up with the the later series. I think I only saw one, maybe the first episode that came out after the original trilogy. I don't remember what it was called, But there was that character Jar Jar Binks or something, Jar Jar Binks. I remember he was in it. Mm, Matthew says you can make the argument that all of the countries in the Middle East contain religious and tribal maniacs, including Israel. The difference is in the political expression of those ideas. And then Matthew says, movies are part of my life fuel. Yeah, I think they can definitely be that life fuel and enjoyable. I used to watch them more often, um, fairly regularly when I was a kid. Uh, but I guess since I've been an adult on my own, I guess when I first got out of college, I remember watching a lot of the classic Hollywood movies from the 40s or 50s, like Bogart movies, and I actually like him a lot. I think he's my favorite actor. I watched movies like Casablanca, The Big Sleep, The Maltese Falcon, and then I think several of his lesser known movies. Um, Trying to remember some title. Key Largo, I think that was one of his another one of his movies. There was one that was it was kind of a Western style movie, but I forget the name of it. But yeah, I like some of the movies from that era. I think Cary Grant. I remember I saw one or two with him in it. Watched some musicals. But yeah, it's been a long time since I used to have a subscription to Netflix, but and I guess I had it for a year or two, and then I just at a certain point I just wasn't using it enough to justify continuing the cost of the subscription, so I eventually canceled it. Um, Matthew says, get a copy of The Big Country. I haven't heard of that one. Casablanca is the big one, says Kudababa. Objectivists seem to love Casablanca, but it didn't do much for me. That's from Kudababa. Um, what was there was a Greta Garbo movie, uh, Ninotchka. I think that was the one. I saw that one. I guess I somewhat enjoyed that. I guess that one, I don't know if that's involves Nazis or communists, but it makes light of them. I remember, I think it was Ayn Rand saying that she didn't think some things were an appropriate subject of humor. And I don't know if she gave that example or if some other objectivist gave that as an example of a movie that um, uses some evil regime like communist Russia or Nazi Germany and um, makes light of it. Um, and I guess just given the horrors of what actually happened in those regimes, uh, you might think it's not an appropriate subject of humor, but there might still be aspects of the movie you can enjoy, even if it's true that it has, even if that's a flaw of it. Definitely good to have life fuel. Yeah, art can serve that purpose. Um, Fiction, uh, Ayn Rand certain fiction certainly, um, but I just haven't spent much time reading it. Reading fiction in general. I'm mostly focused on nonfiction. Well, I guess if you include the Bible, you might say that's fiction of a sort. Um, at least much of it. I don't believe everything in the Old Testament is true. Like the miracles, parting the Red Sea and turning a woman into a pillar of salt. So, so I have been reading the Bible recently. Story of Joseph in particular. At the end of the book of Genesis, um, says Whiplash is legendary. I did see Whiplash. It's been years, but yeah, I did see that. I remember Dr. Peikoff was very enthusiastic about that movie, as well as Chocolat. Um, Kuda Baba says, "You don't think Noah got a pair of every living thing onto his big boat?" LOL. Yeah, that'd have to be that would be quite a feat. I have a better sense of the history of the Old Testament or the history of the world according to the Old Testament, I should say. Now, um, now that been spending some more time on it. So, like one thing I've learned is that there were 10 patriarchs from Adam to Noah, and then 10 more patriarchs from Noah to Abraham. I think that's what I read. So I guess the patriarchs are like well, it was like son of a son of a son of a son. So you can trace a chain of the generations going from Adam all the way to Jesus, according to the Bible. And I guess a big turning point is the flood, which Kudababa's comment made me think of because he mentioned Noah. So I thought of the flood, and so the antediluvian period and the post-diluvian period. So before the flood, there were 10 patriarchs going back to Adam, and then I, I actually I can say their names. I have a timeline. I have a timeline of world history, which I use a lot when I study history to help me visualize how it all fits together. Maybe I'll show it on stream sometime. It's really helpful. Um, it's like a 20-foot long book, and you can unfold it and see the entire timeline of world history. So, starting with Adam, we have Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and then Noah. And these people, they're set to live for centuries. I think Methuselah is the longest living one. Allegedly, he lived for 969 years. So those are the 10 patriarchs, the first 10. And then after the flood, after the deluge, we've got, okay, so Noah's son Shem. I guess he's the next one. Shem, Arphaxad, Heber, Peleg, Serug, Nahor, Terah, and then Abraham. So I think that's the next 10 patriarchs. And then you get Isaac and Jacob. Um, and those last three. So I get another thing I learned recently is there's a broad sense and a narrow sense of patriarch. So the 20 patriarchs that I just read out, the 10 before the flood and the 10 after the flood, that's the broad sense of patriarch. But then there's a more narrow sense of the term patriarch where it only refers to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are the ones who are I guess they're the main figures in the latter part of the book of Genesis, along with Joseph. Well, I don't think he's considered a patriarch, but he's the son of Jacob, who whose name is changed to Israel after he wrestles with an angel. And then Jacob's 12 sons became the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. And maybe I'll read about that soon. But I just finished the story of Joseph. Um, all right, so there's a little Bible history for you, which actually I got motivated to read because on stream I was talking about Israel quite a bit, and then to understand the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I had to read up in history, and eventually I was led back. I was focused on like late 19th century and early 20th century history of Israel before there was even a state of Israel, just like during the British Mandate period. But then that raised certain questions in my mind, and um, that made me want to learn about the earlier history of the region. And eventually, I just decided I'm going to go way back and read some about the Bible. So for the last, I don't know, week or two, I've been reading about the history of the Bible, or according to the Bible. Matthew says apparently biblical Enoch didn't die, so technically he's still alive today. Oh yeah, I saw something about that. I think maybe he was taken from the earth by God when he was 345 years old or something. So maybe he's been hanging out in heaven or somewhere. But um, so I wonder about if you all were raised Jewish or Christian or what. But I guess if you know this, Matthew, maybe you have maybe you were raised in Christian or Jewish culture. You don't have to tell me, of course, but um, it's interesting to get to know my audience some. So maybe you learned about this in Bible school or something, which I never went to. I didn't go to a church or synagogue growing up. I learned a lot about this only after I was an adult. Kudababa says, I'm so glad I was raised without religion. I can't imagine having to learn all that nonsense. Um, yeah, I can appreciate that. I had some relatives who were religious, but they weren't in my immediate family, so they couldn't exert that religious kind of influence over me. Fortunately, I had a more secular upbringing. Kudababa says, I did try to read the Old Testament though, just to be informed. Only got about a third through it before I quit. Yeah, it's a long book. I actually read the whole thing, the Testament and the New Testament, only after I was an adult. I think I was around 20, 25, 20, or 24, somewhere around there. But I also wanted to be informed because it's been very influential on history. So whatever you think of it, however you evaluate it, it could still be helpful for understanding the world, understanding different cultures and how the world evolves, why things are the way they are today. It took me maybe about a year to read the whole thing. I remember I took a break from reading Will Durant to read the Bible. So Will Durant, as some of you may know, he's a historian who wrote a very long series of books, like 2 feet long on the bookshelf, 11 volumes called The Story of Civilization. And I think I had read up to somewhere maybe in the ninth volume, The Age of Voltaire. And I decided to take a break from it to read the Bible. I guess partly because I could tell just from reading that story of civilization that religion was coming up all the time. It's just so influential in how society evolves. So I thought it would be good to actually go to the primary source and become more familiar with it. And so I took a year off to read the Bible, and then I went back to reading Will Durant and finishing it. And eventually, I published an article about that series on the Objective Standards website. That's my one publication in a journal. It's my article about Will Durant's series, The Story of Civilization. Well, it's actually co-authored with his wife, Ariel Durant. At least the last 5 volumes. The first seven, it's only Will Durant, but the last five are credited to both Will and Ariel Durant. Um, and it's free online. It used to be behind a paywall, but now you can read my article for free. I might try to advertise it more later. Matthew says in reply to Kuda Baba, he says, made me think of comedian Dave Allen talking about a nun telling him about the Trinity as a little boy. Kuda Baba says, I haven't heard Dave Allen. I'll look for it. I haven't heard of Dave Allen either. Matthew says, saw it on QI. I don't know what QI is. And then I went to C of E. Oh, is that Church of something? Affiliated school? Oh, Church of England? Are you English? Then you say, but Anglicans are pretty passive. I went to a C of E affiliated school, but Anglicans are pretty passive. Gives you enough info to realize it's bullshit. That's what Matthew says. I'm guessing that means Church of England's. And then Kuda Baba says, where can we read it? I wonder about this name, by the way, Kuda Baba. Like, what does Kuda Baba mean? Or where did you get that name from? If you want to share, I would be interested to hear. Okay. Well, you know what? I think this might be a good time to end the stream. I've been going on for 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is about my average time. And looks like maybe the chat is slowing down a bit, and no one has called in. So maybe I'll give you 1 more minute if someone wants to call in quick. Maybe we can do a short call, but otherwise, I think I might just end the stream. Oh, Kuda Baba says it's just a nonsense name, a mix-up of Barracuda from an old radio commercial. Hmm. Okay. Well, now we know the etiology of Kuda Baba, and I'm guessing Matthew Stroud is from England, based on what he said about going to a Church of England school. I like it when I get some European listeners, so that sometimes we had someone from South Africa call in on the last stream. Maybe it's too early or too late in the day to get any Israeli callers. Let's see what time it is in Israel. Time in Israel. It's 1:11 a.m. So that's 10 hours ahead of me. So at the start of the show, 11 p.m. Israel time. Maybe that's not too late for some people. So I guess they could come in. Or they could just be night owls. Oh, Kudababa says he's in Florida. FYI. All right. I used to go down to Florida yearly because I had relatives down there as a kid, so we would drive down every summer to visit them. I was from Virginia originally. That's where I was born and raised, so we would travel down to Florida, um, usually once a year for a week or so. Okay, Matthew says QI is a UK panel show hosted by Stephen Fry. QI means quite interesting. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that reference. All right. Maybe CPG is gone. I was thinking maybe I would read that article that he mentions if he was here, but it looks like he might have left. I guess I could try that in a future stream if he comes back. I think I'd be more motivated to do it that way than just to read it offline on my own time. I wouldn't necessarily read the. Oh, he says he's here. Maybe he wasn't interested in the discussion about the Bible and so on. Um, just look at it 2 minutes, he says. All right, I'll look at it for 2 minutes now. I guess you can't put a link to it because I think YouTube filters out links unless they're from me. Um, are you talking about the New York Times article that you mentioned about that guy, Feroz? Matthew Stroud says he's here in Surrey, England. 11:11 his time. Okay. Yeah, CBJ is it. Okay, New York Times article on Feroz Sidwa. Let me see if I can find that. Or by him, not on him. I'm not sure which. Okay, here's a page of. Okay, I guess he has one article there titled 65 Doctors, Nurses, and Paramedics: What We Saw in Gaza. That's the title of the article. And then the first, I guess this is a quote from it. All I see right now is a quote. I'm going to click on it in a second and see if it allows me to read it, or any part of it at least. But the quote says, nearly every day I was there, I saw a new young child who had been shot in the head or the chest, virtually all of whom went on to die. Okay. Now I just clicked on the link. It says opinion guest essay. And here's a picture of a silhouette with a crosshair on someone's head. And then it says create a free account or log in. All right. So it's not going to let me read this unless I create a free account or log in. And do I want to do that now? I don't think I want to do that now. Maybe you could send me like a excerpt from it in email or something, and I can read that, read a few paragraphs, because I can't see any of the article now. Yeah, he says to search the title. Yeah, I found the article. I just can't get access to it because it's behind a, well, maybe it's not behind a paywall, but it says I have to either create a free account. What did it say? Either log in, I guess, if you already have an account, or create a free one. Um, so maybe they'll give me a free. Oh, now I just clicked on it again, and now I can see the article. I don't know why it's. Oh, now it's gone. I was able to see it for a few seconds, and then they put up a screen that blocked it out. Uh, gain access to limited free articles, news alerts, select newsletters, podcasts, and some daily games. All right, I'll try it. I'm going to put in my email. I guess I'll use the one that I mentioned on stream before. All right, now I got to choose a password. I'm gonna save that somewhere else. Okay. And now I'm gonna say create account. Account created. Free unlimited access for 7 days. Your new account includes a free trial. Oh, so I think it's going to ask me for, oh no, it says I can continue without subscribing. Oh, but is that going to put me at the previous? Oh, this is a 1 day offer. Looks like there's I'm just going to hit continue without subscribing and see what happens. All right, now it's giving me options to set up my profile. Like it wants to know what particular topics I'm interested in. Can I just skip this part? I'm just hitting continue, continue, continue. Not right now. Okay. Explore the times. Okay, now I'm back at the article. All right, I think it's gonna work now. Okay, I just got to the article. Matthew says, could we compare this article to eyewitness accounts from hostages taken by Hamas? All right, so let me just read a little bit of this. It says by Fariz, uh, 65 doctors, nurses, and paramedics. What we saw in Gaza. That's the title. By Feroz Sidwa. Dr. Sidwa is a trauma and general surgeon who worked at the European hospital in Khan Yunis, Gaza for 2 weeks in March and April. And this article is dated October 9th, 2024. So a little bit over a year after the Hamas attack on October 7th. So here's the first paragraph. I worked as a trauma surgeon in Gaza from March 25th to April 8th. I guess that means of 2024. I volunteered in Ukraine and Haiti, and I grew up in Flint, Michigan. I've seen violence and worked in conflict zones, but of the many things that stood out about working in a hospital in Gaza, one got to me. Nearly every day I was there, I saw a new young child who had been shot in the head or the chest, virtually all of whom went on to die, 13 in total. At the time, I assumed this had to be the work of a particularly sadistic soldier located nearby. But after returning home, I met an emergency medicine physician who had worked in a different hospital in Gaza 2 months before me. I couldn't, and then there's a quote from that emergency physician, I guess. It says, quote, I couldn't believe the number of kids I saw shot in the head, I told him. Oh, that's quote of Feroz talking to this emergency physician, I guess. He says, I couldn't believe the number of kids I saw shot in the head. Uh, to my surprise, he responded, yeah, me too, every single day. And there's some images of x-rays, which I guess are of kids who were shot in the head. Okay, maybe I'll just read one more paragraph because this is a long article. So here's here's the next paragraph. An enormous amount of information about the extent of the devastation in Gaza has been gleaned from satellite data, humanitarian organizations, and Gaza's Ministry of Health. However, Israel does not allow journalists or human rights investigators into Gaza outside of a very small number of embedded reporting trips with the Israeli military, and stories from Palestinian journalists in Gaza have not been read widely enough, despite the incredible risks they take in reporting there. Wasn't there a some guy who was holding hostages when he was a journalist? This is me talking now. I heard there was some journalist, was it for Al Jazeera? But he actually had hostages in his home or something. Yet he was one of the journalists. I think I heard something like that. Um, all right. Um, and then the next, I'll just read this one sentence, one more sentence from this article. The next paragraph, it says, um, so after he says, Palestinian journalists in Gaza have not been read widely enough, despite the incredible risks they take in reporting there. Then he says, but there is a group of independent observers who have seen this war from the ground day after day, volunteer health care workers. All right. Well, hopefully these other independent observers aren't people who would hold Israeli hostages and report at the same time. But anyways, that's all I'm going to read from now. Uh, Maybe I'll read more of this later and have more to say about it in a future stream. But I wanted to at least read a little bit of this. CPG said look at it for 2 minutes, so I think I looked at it for 2 minutes. Um, but that's all for now on this, and maybe I'll do more later. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Um, okay. Kudababa says, I won't believe a word a socialist says, assuming he's a socialist. CBG says, thanks for looking. You're welcome. Maybe I'll look at it more later. And then Matthew says to CBG, I sincerely suggest you look into the fallacy of context dropping and the concrete bound mentality. It could help clear up some of your bias slash confusion slash unobjectivity. And then CPG replies to Matthew saying, I suggest you look at facts and figures. Okay, so there's a little back and forth going on there in the chat. But I think I'm going to end the stream now and we can continue again. I plan to stream again at my normal time, Wednesday, 1 p.m. I stream on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. So we can continue the discussion then. Thanks everyone for coming by. I do appreciate it. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the shares. Thank you for the subscribes. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. I will see you later. Bye bye.